Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Goodman. I hold the Simon Chair in Political Economy here at CSAS, and I work on Asian economics. Delighted to welcome you all here to CSAS for this joint program with my good friend and colleague, former colleague, Wendy Cutler from the Asia Society Policy Institute. We're delighted to co-host this event on Womenomics, as we like to, or as Japan likes to call women's economic empowerment. We're delighted that this is made possible because of a visit, a unique and first ever visit by a group of what is being called Keidanren Female Executives Mission to the United States. So I think you all know that Keidanren is the top business organization in Japan, and it is, I think this is an analytical, factual point. That it is a male-dominated organization, and most missions to the United States include almost entirely men. This is the first ever mission by only women, as I understand it, from Keidanren. So we're delighted to be hosting that for this first ever event. To talk about this important topic. A couple of administrative, by the way, welcome to our online viewers. We have always a loyal audience online. Delighted to have you with us. A couple of administrative notices. Please turn off your phones or any noise-making devices, or at least mute them. If there's any kind of incident, an emergency or something, just basically follow my instructions. There's an emergency exit back here that goes down to the alley, or if appropriate, we can go out the front, and there's a little park across the street that we can assemble in. That's, I think, it for the announcements. So let me just take advantage of being up here to before I introduce our first speaker, our keynote speaker, to say that we've done a few events in the Simon Chair on women's economic empowerment, and there are a lot of a lot of reasons to support women's empowerment generally, but as an economic proposition, I don't think of it as a kind of luxury. I think of it as a necessity. And when you think about Japan's situation, this is an absolute economic imperative to get women empowered economically. If you study economics, you learn about GDP. And one simple way to define GDP is it's the number of people working, or the hours they work, times the amount each person can work in an hour, right? That's it. That's basically what you do to produce wealth or income in a country, right? Japan is facing what can only be called a demographic crisis or catastrophe. Its population peaked in 2010 at about 128 million, and that number is projected to be on current trajectory 87 million. It's going to drop from 128 million to 87 million by the year 2060, which is, as I say, catastrophic for any country. By that time, there will be only one working age person for every elderly person and child in the country. So, as I say, it's a matter of simple mathematics that you got to get as many people working as much as they can and as hard as they can and productively as they can to try to bend that arc if you want growth, which every organism, including an economy, needs. Women in Japan are clearly not participating at the same level as men, although higher than here, by the way, but 67% versus 85% of male participation. And women are not as productive in the economic sense. They're not doing things that are as making as much of a contribution to growth as men. And some statistics show that are part of this conversation today. Only 3.5% of board members in Japanese companies are women. Only 13% of management positions in Japanese companies are held by women. So Prime Minister Abe recognizes this is a problem and has set out some good targets and some good policies to achieve improvements in this situation. He's targeted by 2020 73% women's participation, 30% of women in leadership positions, 500,000 new child care positions or spaces, encouraging fathers' maternity leave, which is, by the way, paternity leave, which is actually officially there is actually paternity leave in Japan, unlike here. But only 2.6% of men take advantage of it, and they're trying to get that to 13%, which is still modest, but at least a big improvement from today. So that's one thing we're going to talk about today is what is the Abenomics doing about, what is Abe, Prime Minister Abe and his government doing about this problem, and how much progress are they making? There have been some really interesting private sector examples of trying to deal with this issue. There was an article that was in the Wall Street Journal, I think the other day, about a couple of companies, Taisei and Daikin, that have some really creative things, including encouraging men to take paternity leave and then having them write about their experience in something called the Papa Report, which, this other company that's incentivizing women to come back early from maternity leave by giving them extra childcare and other benefits. So there's some creative things in the private sector. The Economist, this week's Economist, has a leader, as the Brits call it, an editorial about gender budgeting, which is really interesting, about providing, for example, tax breaks for second income earners in families to deal with the realities of some of the obstacles that are preventing women entering the workforce or staying in the workforce and productively contributing to economic growth. So there's a lot to talk about, and I shouldn't be the one talking about it. These executives that we have in front of us should be doing that with Wendy Cutler's help. But first, we're going to have a presentation from our keynote speaker, Haruno Yoshida, who is President and Representative Director of BT Japan. She's been in the communications business for a long time all over the world. She's also a Vice Chair of the Board of Counselors of Keidanren, which is a big deal. It's the first, I think you're the first woman in that position. There we go. Self-applause, there we go. And I don't know if you know anything about Japan. Again, that's a big deal. So delighted to have Yoshida-san with us, and then Wendy will take over from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. Oh my goodness, this is Memorial Day, you know. First female-only mission from Keidanren, as Matt described, most male-dominated, largest business organization in Japan. A lot of adjectives, right? So that, you know, this is such a big deal for me. I'm so overwhelmed. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And thank you for attending, you know, your precious time, you know, here with us today. Let me talk a little bit around that, where Womenomics is all about. This is one of Japan's growth strategy that the Prime Minister, Mr. Abe, laid out 4 years ago. Where are we right now? So let me just go through some slides. Since we are the business mission, I'd like to touch on the Womenomics, woman and economics, especially the business effect and also the business opportunity. We should jump all over it together. So country perspective, right? What's that the Womenomics' point is? So as Matt described, aging society, decreasing population, we are losing 30 million workforce in next 50 years. That is going to be Japan's business growth showstopper. So first time in history, after century, first time, the Prime Minister of the country said, wake up sleeping all those, you know, smart beauties. We need your help. And we're like, us? You know, smart sleeping beauty is right, because according to OECD recent report, Japanese females are ranked top in two things. One is numeracy, and another is literacy. If you can do those two, you can do pretty much anything in the business field, right? So how does that translate to a business sector? We are talking about 75 trillion Japanese yen's potential business growth if female advancement in society get to the level of male. It's a big deal. 15% of GDP potential growth. That's bigger than any free trade discussion going on around the world. So think about it. We have to capitalize it, right? So how are we doing? Initially, Prime Minister Mr. Abe laid out a very aggressive target, 30% female leadership by 2020. We are like, wow. How are we doing? So started 4 years before, right? Now, leadership position started from 11%. Now we jump up to 13.5%. Obviously, we can do much faster than this, but at least we are going in the right direction, and the progress is much faster than any GDP growth. Challenges, obviously lots of challenges, right? Again, that this is the first initiative. We never done that before in history, century after century. So it's almost like building a civilized society in jungle. You need all the infrastructure to support females so that we can free up their time to, associate in the business field. What do we need? A lot. But I would say the biggest challenge is obviously is that work-life balance, right? 30 million to 40 million kids are queuing for daycare center. Obviously, we don't have enough. Where's male? Male at work, long hours, 9 to 9, shoulder to shoulder. That has to be changed. When you're talking about female advancement in society or business field, we have to also talk about male advancement in household. We have to share the load, right? But most importantly, I would say female empowerment is far most important thing. We have to feel like we want to do that. We want to go back to work. 60% female will quit job usually after they birth the first child. So that's a situation we have to fix it. So for female empowerment, I would say that right role model so that the youngsters after us feel like if that is the case, we want to do that. So lots of pressure on our shoulder. First, female, executive pioneers. So employment ratio, female employment ratio is getting better and better. Right now, actually, past 4 years, we increased 1.6 million female employment. Right now, 28 million females are working. So how does that translate in the world map? It's better than the OECD average. Actually, surprisingly, it's better than USA. We are ranked number 16 in the world for employment, female employment ratio. However, the big caveat is that still a lot of part-time worker included in it. So we have to fix, because of the challenges that I previously mentioned, they cannot go back to work in a full-time basis. Women executive, how are we doing? We doubled the number of women executive past 4 years. Right now, 1,388, maybe today 89, every day increasing. 1,388 female executives are in place. But this is a country of 130 million, right? We should have more than that. But at least we are going the right direction for sure. I'll skip a couple of the slides. This is important. This is the tangible business impact happening to see in the market. Female enrollment in many projects boost the sales. One example, Nissan car, designed by female, boost the sales. Lawson, retail store, female tasted packing lunch, boost the sales. Obviously, it's a packing lunch. Mitsui Real Estate, project led by female, urban community development, residence area, boost the sales. See, those adds up to going towards 75 potential trillion yens business growth, right? We should jump all over it. By the way, my favorite quote came from your previous Secretary of Commerce, Ms. Penny Pritzker. She said the world consumer market size is 18 trillion US dollar. Out of that, 12 trillion US dollar is decided by female. If you are the right CEO, wants to grow your business even a bit, don't you want to have the same viewpoint of your consumer decision maker in your key section, such as board member, right? So that has to happen. We really see the tangible business growth after they start hiring female in the right position. So that's great. Keidanren has done a lot of promotional seminars and programs to, keep this momentum going. I'll just skip a little bit of slide, but let me just touch on the between Japan and the U.S. relationship, because this has been the 70 years of great relationship after World War II. Right? This probably is a long committed marriage than any one of us in this room experienced, because we all look like 30 years old. But this is backed up by mutual business beneficiaries, I would say. So business impact is always very important to progress further partnership strengths. So what's going on? Japan's FDI in the US is increasing rapidly, and right now it's 411 billion US dollar. And number one is UK, but we are ranked number 2. US investing in Japan a lot. US FDI in Japan is all the time number 1, 109 billion US dollar. Exports from Japanese company in US is increasing as well. And Japan is contributing for US exports, 78 billion US dollar, which is not small. Job creation, 1.7 million job created by Japanese companies, and that translated to 580 billion. So we've been doing not only just a partnership for many things, but also we brought each other the business benefit, and that's what we can consider for female network. Female diversity discussion, this gender discussion can be elevated to a next level, I would say. This is again the woman and an economist, and both Prime Minister and your new presidency especially is endorsing it. And we are talking about 75 trillion Japanese yen potential growth in Japan that you want to look into together with us. And then again, that most of that, 2/3 of that market is decided by female. Why don't we jump all over it and put and add our ideas so that way we can grow that business opportunity together? And this is something that, since we are the mission from a business sector, this is something that we want to look into along with your business community next 2 days, and looking forward to working closely with you even further going forward. Thank you very much.
We're just going to remove the podium and get the panelists up.
Well, thank you very much, Yoshida-san, for those great remarks. And
Thank you.
We want to welcome everyone here this afternoon. It's a great turnout and an important issue. I do want to recognize an old friend here, Ambassador Tim Grosser. I know he didn't want to be recognized, but I met him when we entered the building, and he told me his long-term commitment to this issue of promoting women in Japan. So we're honored to have you here today. Also, I wanted to recognize the other members of the Keidanren's Female Executives Mission who are here today. We didn't have room for everyone on the panel, but if you could please stand up and say hello to the audience. And I would like to thank my old friend, Matt Goodman, for inviting me here today to chair this panel and to co-sponsor this event with CSIS. Matt has been a dear friend through the years, a friend of Japan, and he's really helped me with my transition to the think tank community. So thank you, Matt. A few years ago, it would have been unheard of to know that a senior female delegation from Japan would be coming here. And then I've learned this is the first Keidan-Ren delegation since the new president has taken office.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
So we are thrilled to have you here today, and we're hopefully going to have a very interesting panel for the audience today. It's a real testament to Womenomics, and things are changing in Japan. I must admit, as someone who's worked on Japan issues for a long time, and have spent a long time sitting across men at the negotiating table and other tables, you see things changing in Japan. There's still far to go, but I think Prime Minister Abe's commitment to Womenomics is a real boost for Japan. I was a skeptic when it was first announced. I thought it was a cute phrase, but it would become quite boring after time, and Japan would move on to another cause. But this really hasn't been the case. And I would also say, but this is not something that could happen overnight. You don't just say one day, we're going to just have women in all these senior level positions in a country like Japan and expect these numbers to turn around overnight. It requires not only top-level government policies, but it requires changes in the workforce, and it requires commitments and lifestyle changes among women and men. And it's very much a work in progress. And before I get to the panel, I just want to say, while we're focusing on Japan today, let's keep in mind that gender issues here in the United States are also a work in progress. We don't have all the answers. We've made some important strides in recent years on this front, but we have quite a ways to go with respect to increasing female participation in the corporate boardrooms, as well as in the public and private sectors. So with that, allow me to introduce our esteemed panel today and get right to the program. We've all met Haruno Yoshida, and she is head of the delegation. I had the honor of meeting her in Japan over a year ago. And when I met her, I said, she's got to come to Washington. We're going to get her on panels, and she's going to share her advocacy and her strong passion for these issues with Americans. Second, it's my pleasure to introduce another new friend, Mitsuru Claire Chino. She is General Counsel of Itochu Corporation, a leading Japanese trading company. In 2013, she became the first female executive officer of any major trading company in Japan. I met her a few months ago in Korea. We were on a panel together for an Asia Society event. And needless to say, we had a lot of fun going back and forth. And finally, and I guess I can call you a resident of Washington, at least for now, is Keiko Honda. She is the Executive Vice President and Chief Executive Officer of the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA, at the World Bank Group. She was the first woman senior partner in Asia at McKinsey, and prior to that, she worked for Bain & Company and the Lehman Brothers. So as you can see, we've got a great panel, and let's get right to the questions. And my first question is, and this isn't because I have a son who's going to get a report card soon, but if you had to grade Prime Minister Abe's Womenomics program, what grade would you give it? Is it a work in progress? Would it be an A, a B, a C?
Oh.
What are its major accomplishments? And what work remains to be done? Claire, perhaps I can start with you.
So I actually used to teach in law school as well, and I was known as a harsh grader. But even given that, I would give him a strong B+. As Matt was saying, this Womenomics is quite remarkable in the sense that it's not about, human rights. It's not about just gender equality. It is about Japan's growth strategy. So it's an economic policy. And to include women's issue in this vital growth strategy, I think is a wonderful thing. So for that, I give him, high marks. I think the results are still yet to be seen, as Yoshida-san mentioned. We are improving, but we still have ways to go to achieve an A+.
Haruna, what would you point to as being the major accomplishments of Womenomics so far? Is it in daycare? Is it promoting IT in the workplace? Is it setting the targets to get more women in the boardrooms and in the public sector? Or is it all of the above or none of the above?
Since my background is ICT, right, I would say this innovation has to be utilized more. What happened to the past 50 years is that the kitchen innovation, household innovation, all the vacuum, washing machine and convenient things in that, kitchen and everything, right? Everything is pushed away. That free up female time to go back to work. But in a workplace, Japan's ICT utilization is still lower than any other, developed country. We are not using that teleworking, regardless of this technology, right? That has to be changed, because this is almost like horse riding. Horse can be the, technology. And what we have to have is a good horse rider. That is leadership, right? And most importantly, horse has to go to the right direction. That's an incentive. I would say that HR scheme, right HR scheme, evaluation, meritocracy, and that directly connected to your paycheck. And if those three are ready, I think that Japan's productivity will be skyrocket. But we haven't done that yet. So that's at the growth, that margin that we can expect next couple of years.
What are the obstacles to telecommuting in Japan?
It's just a business, habit and a culture. You are evaluated by not the result, but by how much sweat you shed in front of your boss. That gotta be changed, right? So that's the business obstacle. The cultural obstacle, big time. Really result-oriented. I hope to happen. That meritocracy has to be in place.
Yeah, I know long hours in Japan. The need to be in the workplace for hours and hours. For me, through my career, I always was stunned when I call the Japanese ministry at noon our time, and there would still be people, not just anyone working in the ministry, but the people you really needed to talk to, which was midnight or 1 a.m. in Japan. Is that changing? Are the long hours being frowned upon? Are people being ordered to go home earlier? Claire, how about in Itochu?
Oh, absolutely. So so today's Monday, right? So
Yeah.
we started Premium Friday for the very first time last week. So last Friday was Premium Friday, and many companies actually decided to let their employees leave early, around early meaning 3 p.m. I think, but to go out and maybe have a half day off to go on an onsen hot spring vacation. So there's definitely this movement towards shortening hours. In our case, we actually started a morning work shift. So rather than working in the evening, we're prohibited from working after 8 p.m. Rather, we're encouraged to come in early. And if you were to come in before 8 a.m., then you actually get morning overtime as well as breakfast.
Okay. Keiko, any views from you on the success of Womenomics and what more can be done or should be done?
Right. Well, harnessing women's role as a workforce and consumer is receiving a renewed attention as a promising catalyst in boosting the nation's GDP. I 100% agree with that. Nevertheless, I still see the gender gap persist in various areas in Japanese society. Let me take an example of World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report of 2016, which ranked Japan as number 111 out of 144 countries. This ranking is based on analysis of 4 areas. 1, economic participation and opportunity. Number 2, education. 3, health. And 4, political empowerment. In particular, Japan is ranked very low in economic participation and opportunity at number 118, and political empowerment at number 103. This is, by the way, Japan's worst ranking of the last several years. Japanese newspaper suggests that securing enough childcare is the major issue for Womenomics. But is this the best solution? While securing childcare is certainly a factor in enabling women to participate in a workforce, there is more to consider. For example, also reducing working hours may be the one. But for me, the best way to retain talent is provide meaningful and interesting jobs and responsibilities. Japan's women labor participation has been increasing, as Matt pointed out, and it's now surprisingly above that of the United States. The wage equality for men and women are also even closer in Japan. But because women in Japan are not necessarily assuming jobs that require expertise or the leadership, the income difference between men and women in Japan is really, really large. In the estimated earned income category, again, I'm still using World Economic Forum data, Japan is ranked number 100 among the 141 countries. Japanese women are well educated, but not assuming high qualified jobs. I think that's how I feel right now.
Well, thank you for that. Earlier, Haruno, you had put up a slide which showed the target for, as expressed by Prime Minister Abe, for women to be in senior level positions by the year 2020. I think the target was initially 30%. My understanding is that target has been now adjusted to 15% for the private sector and 7% for the public sector. Do you think Japan is on track for meeting those goals for 2020? I think you had put up, maybe they're at 16% in 2016.
So right now we are at what, 13.5%.
Okay.
So obviously, this is what I think, right? I haven't given up
Tell
that
us.
yet. I haven't given up that yet. 30%. It's not the linear curve. It's all to do with your confidence, our confidence, market confidence, private sector. It's all about our. This probably we can make it happen. So I would say hockey stick curve. That's my good excuse towards when I miss the target to my boss, right? But this really will go to the hockey stick curve once all that many sectors confidence levels goes up. But at least that we are growing towards the right direction. Don't forget that. And then again, it's just a 4 years initiative. And what's our history? Centuries, right? Just keep going. And at least that you are doing well. We are looking up to you. Western country, developed countries, such as the US, you're doing great. And you also have the business impact as well. I would say for our sustainable change, business impact matters. Because again, we are professionals, right? Business sector. If female viewpoint brings the revenue, why not? So after 4 years, now is the time. That was my point of previous presentation. We can elevate this discussion towards a business opportunity. Let's do that. Bring some tangible something. It's the female participation in the workforce. Meritocracy, result is everything. We have to bring some kind of business result. That's what we want to do as a first female executive mission from Keidanren.
Can I just provide some supporting evidence for that? Absolutely. And that is, in Japan's case, seniority really does matter. Japanese women only started working as businesswomen, especially in large corporations, in the late 80s. And if you were to become an executive officer, you have to be of a certain age. That's at least the way Japan is. And many of these women who have entered Japanese companies in the late 80s are coming to that age. So certainly in the next 4 years, I think there's actually a great chance that there's going to be this, hike.
How come you get that executive? You're just 24, right?
You're only 30.
That's right.
So, we've touched on just the need for maybe a better use of ICT and telecommuting. We've touched upon, and this is all related to this, shortening worker hours and providing kind of more, corporate policies on hours and how late one can work or how early they can work, and providing other incentives. Are there other types of policies that the companies you work for or have worked for, or the organization you work for, have employed to really not only attract female employees, but to really keep them, once they have a family, keep them in the workforce, and then position them to be able to advance to these senior level positions? Are there other policies that you want to share with us?
Well, let me actually share one example. I still think, of course, childcare is important, shorter working hours is important, but interesting and meaningful jobs and responsibilities more important to motivate women to continue working. One example is a Japanese securities company which decided to promote multiple women to the senior executive or executive positions. That worked really, really well because, of course, promoted women are able to share the lessons learned each other. At the same time, the men executives, as well as men subordinates, are able to kind of interact with them, so therefore they can learn how to be inclusive of them in a workplace.
Claire, anything to add there?
I think, we have been talking about just women's issues, but I think it's not really one fix. There's actually a lot going on in terms of changing one's lifestyle, a society's lifestyle. So in our case, we actually found that many women were leaving our company when they got married. And it's not what you think. It wasn't that they were getting married and then leaving the company. It was that their boyfriends at that time were being posted overseas. And therefore, the women decided to quit the job to follow them, or to get married and to get to go overseas. So there's a lot of this rotational staff system within Japanese companies. Maybe that needs to change. I think the millennium are a very different group of people. Young men within our company are very interested in taking part in child caring and have a better life balance. So it's not just one fix about short hours. I think we really need to have a revolutionized change to a way in which we work. Efficiency, working from home, more sort of ways to recognize talent, regardless of seniority or gender, and really looking at the individuals.
Telemarriage, how's that?
Telemarriage. That may work for some people.
Right? Why not? But Telekids is my daughter. She decided to live in Canada. She doesn't want to come back to Tokyo. She doesn't want to, follow mother. So we have been communicating using technology, for a while. But that's the new style of family as well, right? Even though your daughter has different choices and preferences of where she wants to live. I mean, that could be it as well.
Keiko, you had mentioned the idea of experience sharing, and as women are promoted and they can be role models and maybe serve as mentors. Perhaps you can all comment on the whole issue of mentorship and experience sharing. I know for me in my career, having strong mentors was always, very important. And people I turned to at really decisive points in my career, including when I left USTR and joined the Asia Society. I called 2 former USTRs, I won't mention their names, but they're both female, for advice on what to do. First, do you have mentors, and do you have female mentors? And second, are you providing mentoring, I don't want to say services, but are you mentoring young females? And maybe mentor is too formal.
Right.
Is it more kind of being a role model and sharing your experiences? Is that helpful? Does that inspire younger employees?
Well, I think I also strongly believe in the mentorship. And I have a women mentor as well as I have a men mentor. Women mentor, my former employer also kind of working very hard to creating more women leaders, but I think they were on the way. They're still probably on the way. And they decided to kind of, have an official mentor system. Official mentor system was okay, but it's not really. Then I think I kind of studied, but mentor system definitely works. So I started to kind of searching for who you really want to hear from. And I found one mentor, she's in actually Boston office, and I found another mentor, which is a Japanese man in Turkey office. Because by the end of the day, you actually have to hear both, because you have to work with them. So, I kind of stressed to be inclusive, but also you really have to learn how to be inclusive. That's really worked. Also, I just like to kind of introduce another idea of sponsorship in addition to the mentorship. The reason I'm saying is I am actually the mentor of a couple of World Bank relatively young women staff, because they don't really directly report to me. That's why I can provide a mentorship. But also I try to be the sponsor of some of the people in my organization as well as elsewhere within the World Bank Group. Sponsorship essentially means rather than you grab the opportunity to do things, you step down to give something interesting, meaningful, maybe role, maybe opportunity to somebody else, including going to the missions or speaking in somewhere or elsewhere. I think I actually got that one with American sponsor in my foreign organizations, did that several times for me, and it really, really worked. So therefore, I try to do the same thing for my.
That's a great point, right? This is what we need. The sponsorship in the market. That's what we need. So that's what the Keidanren just started. We started to form a first female executive network in the Keidanren, and I don't know how many, 20 or 30, executives in it. And the first thing I did, after I appointed the first female board in the Keidanren, I asked all CEO of large companies, can you be our mentor and sponsor in the market? I will introduce you to all the first pioneers, but you have to foster us to be the leader in the market, as well as you have to help us to be connected to the right people in the market. So now that all the large company CEO every other month show up, 90 minutes, talk about how to be good leader, how he conquer that obstacle and everything in leadership program, but they committed us to get to connected to the other, important people. That's very important. And by the way, the BT has very good program for the mentor program worldwide. Right now, 100,000, employee we have. And whoever raise hands wanted to be a mentor, they can post in the homepage. And whoever around the world can, apply for as a mentee. And now I have 5 mentees, official mentees. And 4 of them are young male. And from young, I can choose, right, from all the resumes. From Asians. So world is changing. More I get more applicants from males and mostly Asian countries. And less female, so it makes me feel good. I like it. I enjoy that.
And are they interested in asking the same issues that a
They see me as a leader, not as a female. And obviously, they have the question, but they see me as a female leader in the market. And through this mentoring program, I'm confident that I can give them, a lot. Not gender difference or anything. Obviously, I can advise them the gender perspective. However, mostly as a leader, their question is, as a leader.
Interesting.
And interesting, but they gave me back the confidence as well.
Big step forward.
Yeah.
Claire?
We actually had a very formalized mentorship program within our company. And of course, it was actually female mentors to female mentees. And the purpose of that program was, of course, to help the mentees, but also to make some of the senior women realize that they are capable mentors. We wanted them to recognize that. And I think that was actually a great success. To the point of sponsorship, I think it's so important. It's not just a Japanese issue. I understand that here in the United States, too, sponsorship is a huge thing. And I think as you climb up the corporate ladder, increasingly so, you need sponsors who are actually really looking after you within the organization, whether it be Japanese or US.
Wendy, can I just introduce one interesting initiative by UN Women? It's called He for She. So men can be a mentor or sponsor of women staff. Could be vice versa. Since International Women's Day, which is March 8th, is coming very soon. So maybe I urge some of men participants today to look at UN Women's website. And actually, you can register yourself for the He for She readership.
Sounds good. Maybe we can turn a little to your career paths and what you've encountered being a woman in Japan as you tried to advance on the corporate ladder. I know each of you have had a really unique career experience, and maybe you can share with us not only what worked and what helped you advance in Japan, but maybe what some of the setbacks were and how you dealt with them. So I don't know who wants to take this question first.
I can.
Okay.
It took 30 years for me to get there, so it takes another 3 hours for me to explain my ladder.
Okay, well, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, all right. I didn't take that quite a Japanese ladder, because when I graduated university, that was that time gender equal in the work site bill just passed through. So, and I was wondering that time, I was looking for a job, and I was wondering how did that work, because there was in parallel Christmas cake rule was in place. My mother always constantly telling me, if past 25, no one will buy you, okay? And equal opportunity, how does that work? And I was somehow, taking advantage of my father's political influence in the market, and I get the job in one large corporation. And right before I graduated university, I fell in sick, so that took 4 or 5 years for me to get recovered. When I recovered in society, that was past the Christmas cake, no one hired me, and the first job I get was an American company, Motorola, because they thought bilingual matters. I could speak some English that time. So, and since then, I thought, just at the thought that there is no place for me to build my career in Japan. So I decided to get out of Japan, and 10 years I was in US and Canada, and I jump around the 5 different countries. 5 different companies in 4 different countries. So my biggest obstacle or challenge was that I have to pave that path myself, bulldoze it, with no role model ahead of me. I could have done that in Japan as well, but I just thought that there was no place that I can go that time in Japan. So that's where I am. But that's why I experienced the multinational experience. And I thought I'm going around the path. However, finally time changes, and the people in Japan thought there is a global resources available, and she is female.
Yeah.
Take advantage of that. So time changes interestingly, right? I was running at the edge of the world. I thought I'm a totally different path. But if time changes, people see that as a value of the country. So we'll see.
Through the years, I have seen a lot of Japanese women work for foreign and U.S. companies. Is that because it's easier to enter and to work for those companies than Japanese companies? They're more flexible, and you don't need to make it, a lifetime career, or what is it about foreign companies besides just speaking English?
At least you are ahead, definitely. When I worked in Motorola 30 years ago, 25 years ago already. Oops, I told her I'm not 25 years old, but anyway, 25 years. I see that top executives, it's almost like a Hollywood movie, female top executive. And I saw her and I thought, my goodness, someday I wanted to be like her, with Chanel suits, kill men after her. I mean, you name it.
And heading a business delegation to
There
Washington.
you go. Yeah. Took 25 years. But really.
Okay, good. Claire?
I actually owe much to the U.S. education, and also, just having grown up here. I spent my formative years here in the United States, and I'm very, very thankful for that, because I think, having spent time here in the U.S., there was so much focus on me as an individual, rather than my, whether I'm Japanese or whether, I'm a woman, whatever. So I think, that experience definitely gave me the confidence to be Claire. And and I spent time in the U.S. working at a law firm. I quit the law firm to join Itochu. I desperately wanted to be with a Japanese company because, quite frankly, Japanese trading companies, whether it be Itochu or any other trading company, the work is fabulous and it's so exciting. And I wanted to be in Japan. But many of my U.S. friends thought I was crazy to give up my U.S. career here to go work for a Japanese company. When I entered Itochu, I was certainly, there was only 2% women, business women in the company. So when I go to meetings, I would be the only woman. And I think, in a Japanese company setting, it's very easy to be very, very self-conscious of the fact that you're a woman. Something that you don't necessarily feel in other environments. But I think the fact that I could stay confident was precisely because of that U.S. experience that I had, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Did you feel comfortable speaking up at meetings when you were with all
I did,
males?
and I think many men accepted that by just looking at me and saying that, well, she's different. She grew up in the U.S. So one of the things, I actually give a lot of talks to junior members in my company, and one of the messages that I want to give them is to be yourself. Don't be caught up by an identity that somebody labels you.
Yeah.
Not your age, not your gender. Just be yourself.
Right.
And have that confidence.
Keiko?
Well, I had a significantly different background, Sana. I admire her, by the way. I was born and grown up southern island of Japan. I couldn't speak any word of English until 22 years old. So, for me, the reason I joined U.S. company was pure, at that time, Japanese corporations are not hiring Japanese women graduated from 4 years college, now living with the parents. That's why I had to go for the American firm. So,
They wanted higher education, or?
I had a 4-year college graduate. But essentially, at that time, women's a pioneer in a business, which that time was more dominated by the men, especially like senior men. So because, under such kind of situation, I have to prove myself by making extra investment. This means putting hours and delivering result consistently. So the strategy that worked for me is, which by the way I still kind of implement, is always deliver beyond expectation. And in a situation that there is not much substantive content to deliver it quickly.
Before everyone else. Well, actually, you raise a good issue, because there is something to be said about women in the workplace. You always want to be a little more prepared, a little more ready, and I don't know, maybe we work a little harder to make sure that we won't be caught not knowing something. That's something I've definitely felt throughout my career. Is that something the two of you have shared as well?
But that's great, right? I would say, because it's such a competitive world. Make us always, put the edge, right? We tend to be competitive, and it's great. Work for me. I wouldn't be in this position if I was not in this new industry, I would say. Because this was such a new industry, ICT. No one had that concrete path of success. So you could make it. As far as you have a new idea and attract the customer, you could make a market, your market. And because this is business, you could translate that market to a number. And again, that this is new industry. That number counts, universal language counts. And if you have significant numbers in the market, that stands out beyond the corporate, beyond the company, beyond market, beyond country. So time to time, when time comes, the others come and hunted me for the position, right? So that's, I would say, translate your effort to numbers. That's the beauty of your putting yourself in a business field. It's almost like a sport, win or lose, but in certain rule and in area, it's very easy for you to put your value in the most tangible way. That's what business all about. Absolutely.
Claire?
I would say that for me, what worked was having a network outside of work. So be it the Asia Society, the World Economic Forum, just having a setting that is so different from your ordinary Japanese company lifestyle and have a different kind of support system. The Asia Society recognized me as there is a leadership program called the Asia 21. So for those of you who are out there eligible, I strongly encourage you to apply for that. But there are leadership programs such as that. And in my case, I think the only reason why my CEO felt comfortable making me an executive officer at the young age of 46, which by the way was 8 years younger than any of my other peers, was the fact that there was this recognition from the outside world. So he could turn to that. And so I applaud really organizations such as that in finding talent in organizations that may not be able to find talent themselves or recognize talent in a sort of traditional way. So.
Maybe one more question and then we'll turn to the floor. And that is, we're all going to share like that one story where we had a setback, or at least we had a bad moment at work being a woman. I'm going to start, so I'm going to give you all time to think what you're going to say. And this is just didn't happen to me one time. I'm sure it happened to some of you, but maybe not. And that is, in some of my meetings in Japan, particularly with the private sector, I would be in a meeting on one side of the table, 2 men sitting next to me, and up against 3 men on the other side of the table, and we'd all be talking, and the man in the center of the table, he'd be head of their delegation, I'd be head of our delegation, I'd be doing most of the talking, and that man would only look at the other 2 men at the table. And the other 2 guys who were working for me, this was horrible for them, right? Because they keep going like, trying to look at her. But these men were just very uncomfortable looking at me, and it just didn't just happen once in Japan, but it happened repeatedly. And did I give you all enough time to think of a story that you can all share? Well, maybe this is something you've shared as well.
This is funny, right? In Japan, business culture, you exchange business card from most seniors. And usually I'm at the boardroom and exchange business with customer. Customer start with my secretary. My secretary is 70 years old, gray hair male. And he has to say, she's the boss. And most of the time, since that my office environment is so international, I'm bunch with non-Japanese staffs, and then I show up in the customer's office, and they think that I'm the translator. A lot of things are funny story, but you have to laugh at it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Who wants to go next? Or if you don't want to, we can turn to the floor.
I have many stories. So when I started, but I think so my first day at an American law firm, I was mistaken for just a college, a student coming in for part-time work. I was bullied by my opposing counsel. I don't know whether it was because I was, short or Asian, woman, young, whatever. On my first day at Itochu Corporation, a business person looked at me and said, I want a man to handle this file. So, and I think, I think I go back to that issue of you don't have to be sort of bound by how others look at you. You know, it's really you trying to stay confident, but it's not necessarily easy to do that by yourself. And I think that's why you need your, you know, support network. So.
Okay,
Wendy, I experienced exactly the same thing.
Okay.
And Yoshida-san, I had exactly the same experience also multiple times. I worked in Japan for many years. But I also have to tell you, I experienced the same thing in many Asian countries, many African countries, many European countries, even in the United States. So this is probably not a Japan-specific issue. I think it's a global issue. If you really feels like, oh gosh, then you can't stop thinking whatever. But you can just going to go on. That's fine, and then we can just going to go on. But because of the perception, I think we should kind of keep working to deliver a bit more. So therefore, your clients, your team, to be inclusive and willing to work for you. I think that effort we have to continue to make. Then I think our collective effort, I'm pretty sure we're making a difference in the future, at least in my daughter's time.
Great. Perhaps we can turn to the floor now. Can I ask everyone to introduce yourself before you ask a question? One question, and let's get to the question and not have a lot of talk before it, so we can get a lot of people asking questions. I think I saw a hand here. You'll get a microphone.
I'm Irina Tividad. I'm president of the Global Summit of Women. Congratulations to all of you. You're amazing. I wanted to emphasize, you were asking about a grade for Prime Minister Abe. There are not many heads of state that would make womenomics as key to competitiveness of their economy. So I would give him an A for intent. And in his speech about this, about last December, he had very concrete steps for how to reach. Now, whether that will happen, of course, is indeed up in the air. But one of the things he said as the biggest hurdle is changing mindset. And I have to tell you, having the head of the country state that women's economic advancement is critical to the country's competitiveness is key. Otherwise, to be frank, Keidan Ren wouldn't have this, principle of a target or a goal for disclosure in terms of quotas for each of the companies. Keizai Doyukai, the Japan Association of Executives, wouldn't have had all kinds of principles for how to advance women, or for the Tokyo Stock Exchange to be directed to now have 2 seats, independent seats, which is the normal route for women, to be available. So I wanted to underscore that and to also emphasize that what you said about giving Japanese women meaningful work is the key for continued engagement. And lastly, my question is, you didn't cover entrepreneurship. I have met some amazing millennial women entrepreneurs who are creating their own jobs and their own wealth. So I think that's something that perhaps one of you could address. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Irene. I know you are such a pioneer in this field, and we're honored that you could join us. And I think you've raised an important issue that we haven't touched upon, and that is the issue of entrepreneurship. Does someone on the panel want to address that issue and how important entrepreneurship is, and also what opportunities it creates uniquely for women?
So obviously, this is not only the gender issue either. Overall, in Japan, the starting up the new business is very difficult situation. Yet it is changing. Big corporate sector dominated is pretty much the share of the market, and that has been the lion's share. There was not so much space that the new startup, building the market share. So it is changing. This is another thing is that the Prime Minister top-down tried to encourage it. And I would say this is again the innovation all about, right? You have to take advantage of all the technologies, changing the mindset, the way we work and everything. But it's I wouldn't say this is the only specific female issue, but overall Japan market issue. But obviously, this has to happen. And there's a lot of things the U.S. can teach us, because look at that, the Silicon Valley. Most of them are. You're smiling at it, but but right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. What she said. It has some to do with the technology evolvement and the adoption in the market. And that even though you are working from a small number of employees, but your productivity is as good as a large corporation or something like that. So it has a lot to do with many things, but it's just the overall Japan market challenges that we try to tackle down right now.
Other questions? Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Hello, I'm Linda Yar at George Washington University. I have a two-part question. First of all, I get the impression from people young women who I knew as students who are going back to Japan, that they're not interested in getting married and having children. So that may be because they want to have their own meaningful careers. So that offers perhaps a demographic challenge on the other end. The other question is, what happens with women whose children are older and who want to re-enter the workforce? Is there a top limit in terms of an obligatory retirement age? So is there scope for them to re-enter the workforce at that point?
I'd like to take that question, or two questions. Re-entering the workforce, but also why some Japanese women may not be so anxious about getting married early and having children and pursuing a career. Claire looks like she's just bursting to say something.
Well, I think the second question is easier. So
Okay,
maybe
go
I'll take
ahead.
the second question.
I'll take the first one.
Okay.
I think, so the retirement age is 60, but you can extend it for 5 more years to 65. But whether you're a woman or a man, I think job mobility is still very, very, it's not as mobile as, for example, compared to the United States. And it's not easy for people to look for work. Some companies are actually trying to keep their talent by actively going after people who have left their companies but who are willing to come back after child rearing. But I would say that it is still not as easy as here in the United States. But having said that, I know that I only know of U.S. law firm experience when it comes to the United States, but off-ramp, on-ramp is an issue for U.S. firms as well. So
let me try to answer that question of the first. Although I've been living in Washington D.C. almost like the last 4 years. Well, at least looking at the statistics, Japanese women's marriage ratio is not necessarily significantly different from the other countries. So Europe, U.S. I have not really looked at every single developing countries, but women actually tend to getting married later stage of their life. That's been kind of global phenomenon. That's definitely decreasing the population growth rate of the world, not only Japan. But having said that, I don't really think this is the bad thing. I think now, at least women in Japan have opportunity. The women equal opportunity law was introduced, I think, in 1986 or 7, less than if my memory is correct. Actually, I got out of college before that. That's why I had to face the challenge I mentioned. Now, I think a lot of Japanese women have opportunity, and I hope they enjoy and that they make a wise decision.
See, our lifespan is getting longer and longer. This is scary. I heard a real report from one bank, analyst. Next generation, our lifespan will be 107 years old. My goodness. So I just finished 1/4 of my life, right? So obviously a lot of things is delayed, perhaps, but biological clock is clicking in terms of childbirth. So that's something that has to be fixed, because unless otherwise, if you get married, later, and then you still. I mean, those are the issues, but I don't know that this medical will change the situation. But it is interesting that the younger generation doesn't, they are not keen to marry early, especially in Japan. It's the economic issue probably is a thing, housing challenges as well. My daughter, who is now living in Canada, but they tend to marry much earlier than Japanese youngsters. So I don't know, I have to look into that more, but what concerns me is that, yes, I talk to the young generation, but they're not so keen to rush into marriage. And a lot of them are 30s, right? And their first child, like 40s, is not a rare story anymore. In fact, my friends born first child when she was 50 years old. So, yeah, we have to see, but yeah.
But child care does seem to be a unique challenge in Japan. I mean, I think Japan's a little further behind in providing adequate positions in child care facilities. Prime Minister Abe's put a lot of priority on that. Another thing I understand is the commutes to work are pretty long for Japanese women. So the idea of, since most Japanese women don't drive to work, it's hard to get your kid, to bring your kid to the workplace is hard, even if you could find child care there. And so I think both of these issues touch upon child care up to a point. If you have a family and you're leaving the workplace, then you have to re-enter. If there was a way you could kind of stay and not leave, and there were adequate child care facilities, that might help. How big a problem do you think the issue of child care is in Japan?
And not only child care, elderly care as well,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
aging society,
Yeah.
and who is that? Who is
Right.
taking care
And
of
women
the
feel
mothers
both
and the females,
pressures.
right? Definitely, that has to be addressed, and that's number one top priority that the government, and especially government, working on it. But I would say, takes a few years for us to build all that the facility to be ready, in the market to cover the 40,000 queuing kids. But teleworking, you can do yesterday. I mean, you have the technology. We have such a technology, and the kids get sick and sleep like 3 hours straight. If you have a solid 3 hours, you can do a lot of things from home, right? So there's a lot of a way that we can detour that child, daycare center issue.
Other questions? We have time for one or two more.
Yes, Dave Fitzgerald, retired Foreign Service. I was wondering if you could address the question of gender differences in the sciences and technology. Japan and American experience is somewhat different than that, perhaps, but in America it seems that there is more men that are in the technology industries, which seem to be the leading edge for growth. And if Japan is to try to develop more growth, there has to be more women in the science and technology industries. Is that a key priority or concern right now in economic circles in Japan?
I think you should have.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
It is a big topic, and in fact, the G7, one of the agenda was the female advancement in the STEM area.
When Japan hosted last year.
Right,
yeah.
the last year, right? So I recommend my daughter to be a cybersecurity expert because I know how much I'm paying for my staff, a young female cybersecurity expert. And then her boyfriend said, nah, that doesn't sound cute. And she said she wanted to be the lawyer only because George Clooney's wife is cool, she said. But that's not where money is. Oops, no offense if there's any lawyer here. But cybersecurity is right now in Japan. Already 17,000 IT resources are scarce. By 2020, it will be jump up, and cybersecurity big time, 200,000. We need it, but we don't have the resource available. So that's the market. You might want to consider, even foreign workers, that you want to be jump all over it. And that's not only Japan issue, that worldwide, the IT resource is not there yet. And we cannot be selective either, female or male or foreign workers or whatever. Whoever, has that capability, that's the job opportunities there.
Okay, with time for one more question. Who would like to pose that? Yeah, in the back.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Evelyn Suarez, and I'm president of the Association of Women in International Trade. My question to you is, and I also have to say I'm a mother of a daughter who's an engineer. My question to you is, you described the significant and important ties between the United States and Japan. Do you see this, or do you see an opportunity for the United States and Japan to advance President Abe's very noble objectives to advance women?
I'd like to answer that. Is this an area of cooperation between the U.S.
Absolutely,
and Japan?
absolutely. So that's my point of the presentation. We are looking at 75 trillion yen, Japanese yen's, potential business growth if that female advancement get to the level of a male. And you've done this 20, 30 years ahead in terms of that. Let's see what you can provide. That's an investment opportunity for you to look into seriously. In fact, I think that should be the agenda always at trade, negotiation or anything. How about female advancement in society? That's the big dynamism of the market move. Where the market move, always money is, right? What opportunity we should look into? What service is required if female, goes on the business, go back to work? All those things, daycare center, any kind of services, we need it. But absolutely, that the female viewpoint counts. 2/3 of the market. There's already the good example of Nissan design car and, packing lunch and all those things is we are seeing. I probably think that we need your help, again, that you are ahead of us. Let's take serious look into it, what business is available and expected next couple of, decades, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Other comments? Okay. Well, with that, why don't I'm going to close this session. If you can join me in thanking this panel. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. At least for me, this is just a unique group of women, and they're unique because they're on our panel, but there are a lot of women like this in Japan. And I think there's a lot we can do together. But I would also just stress, we don't have all the answers here in the U.S. So I think cooperation in this area,
right.
Sharing experiences and trying to learn from each other's experience could really help both countries as they try and advance women in the workplace. Thanks again for coming. Have a great day.